Press TV correspondent from Paris, Ramin Mazari, joins us, and we also have Tony Gosselin, investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Well, Ramin, what is the latest that we have on this at this point?
Well, it's really going sort of like gangbusters for the strikers. We have 85% of all the trains in France shut down, and in the Paris region alone, 10 million people use it to get to work every day. So I think that our viewers can really imagine the scope of this labor movement. I think we have to keep in mind that, many people are talking about 1995, and it certainly is the largest general strike since then. But back in 1995, the government was only talking about changing part of the retirement system. This current plan of Macron's is changing the entire system. What Macron wants to do is something which is totally unprecedented in the world. No country has a one-size-fits-all universal system, and the reasons for that are really pretty obvious. It's very, working in a air-conditioned office is very different from doing manual labor out in the heat and the cold. Not everybody can be doing that until they're 64 years old working these manual jobs. And every country around the world's pension system reflects this reality. So you can, our viewers can imagine why there is so much opposition to it. On top of that, we still don't even know the details. The government has purposely kept the details of this radical plan hidden because they're obviously going to be so inflammatory. One thing that the general strike has done is that it has forced the government to finally release these details, and that's going to happen on Wednesday. Tomorrow is going to be another day of huge strikes, and we will probably see, people are hoping, another 1.5 million people out in the street like there were on Thursday. Certainly it's going to be better weather than it was Thursday when it was almost 0 degrees. So, that would make nearly 1 week of major strikes. And then on Wednesday, the government is going to finally release these details, and that could inflame the situation even further because it's obviously going to be such a very, very far-right economic program.
Well, Tony Gosselin, do you think that what Emmanuel Macron is doing is too radical when it comes to the reform of the pension system?
Well, I mean, it's basically a battle against the people in France. I mean, it's just over a year since the protests started, and we're now in the situation where another load of protests have begun. It's almost as if everyone in France wants to remove Macron. But I'd just like to point out that there's an important aspect to this, which is if Macron gets his way and the whole neoliberal programme with the pensions, the privatisations goes ahead in France, this may be the last chance to people who are running public services, because there's a lot of public services nationalised, more than anywhere else in Europe, I think, I mean, I'm not 100% certain, but it's certainly extremely nationalised country with many industries still controlled by the government. They're trying to change France to bring it in line with other countries in Europe where most of these public services have been privatised and have now become effectively rackets for the bankers, almost like gangsters, where they are providing a service that everybody needs, and so they can jack up the price as much as they want. And I think the French workers realise that if these privatisations, these kinds of things, this sort of programme that Macron is putting in place is allowed to unfold over the next couple of years, then they may not have a chance to bring the country to a standstill, almost as they've done today. I mean, the big question going behind all of this is looking at the bigger picture, is money there to serve or enslave humanity? And as the money system is used to take these industries, these essential services, these utilities away from public ownership and then put them into the hands of private individuals for private profit, you find that the people suffer. And that's one of the reasons, I think, why the strike has been so solid. And it'll be fascinating to see what Macron does, because he's set himself against the vast majority of French people. And obviously, he's taking on democracy.
Mm-hmm. Ramin, do you get the feeling that with the Yellow Vest protests to occur now every Saturday, with that momentum to still be sustained, and now these protests, that in any shape or form this will maybe threaten Macron's presidency, perhaps? I mean, how do you see that situation?
Well, I think, we shouldn't overestimate the influence of the Yellow Vests right now. They are taking the back seat. Their protests are not attended, not as well attended as they were 1 year ago. However, we should not underestimate their cultural impact. It's clear that the Yellow Vests provided the spark, for this social movement, and people have said that very, very openly, and they are still overwhelmingly supported in the very, very rare time that France's top polling agencies actually asked them. The Yellow Vests are the most supported political group in the country, we can say. However, it doesn't really translate anymore into people really turning out. The Yellow Vests, they are out at the union demonstrations. You asked about, is this going to really threaten Macron's presidency? What happens when a general strike doesn't end? It's called a revolution. So it's possible. But I think that the French are really very sort of complacent about their neo-imperial system. They don't like neoliberalism as much as their Western counterparts. Macron's support base is a very, very solid
We don't in the UK. We don't like neoliberalism. We're just not as organised as the French at fighting it. The French have got decades of very good organisation and political, and they're much more prepared to come out onto the streets and change things historically than countries like the UK. The British, I'm afraid, prefer to go on social media and complain down the pub. The French get out in the streets and change things.
Ramin, go ahead.
Well, I think that's certainly true. I mean, I see your point, but only about 10% of all workers here in France are unionized. Being more socially active, more politically active than the Brits and the United States, that's kind of like being the tallest of the seven dwarves. So and you also mentioned about how much of the economy here is nationalized. This is not Iran. Iran's economy is very nationalized and run for the people. The French state only owns about 100 billion euros worth of the economy. In the Chirac administration, that you saw these massive privatizations, and then also with Sarkozy, and then also now with Macron, France looks very good, compared to the Anglo-Saxon world. It's true, but if they're so very, very leftist, as right-wing, Brits and Americans say, how come, they have endured, 10 years of austerity? We still have a general strike. So I get your point. The proof is sort of in the pudding. Let's see if they actually win a social protest this time around.
Okay, we're going to end it there. Thank you very much for that, Ramin Mazari.
One quick point.
Go ahead.
One quick point.
Sure.
The key thing in this protest could be the participation of the police. Because if the police are joining these strikes, which they are, many of them, we could see the breakdown of law and order in France. And that really will be a problem for Macron. He'll have to, pull his socks up.
Is that true? I mean, what kind of participation are we seeing from the police? Ramin, quickly if you can.
Well, police are actually banned from going on strike, but there are, there are off-duty cops showing up, showing their solidarity, but they cannot officially go on strike. But this analyst is certainly correct. If Macron loses the cops, that's it. But cops have told me they need to see 10, 20 million people out on the street for them to, stand down, and that would be a revolution, and that hasn't happened yet.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ramin Mazari and Tony Gosling. Thank you, investigative journalist from Bristol. And that does it for our news review.